The numbers around New York City's migrant crisis are staggering. Not only has about 100,000 people arrived within the city limits in the last year, but they've also done so at one of the most economically unfavorable times possible. The result of that, according to Mayor Adams, has so far been the worst humanitarian crisis in the history of the city. But that's not the worst of it. Issues like homelessness, criminal activity, and legal employment are all about to become terrible. In this video, we'll be taking you in depth into the very bleak future the New York migrant crisis is set to bring about. You might not catch it on first glance, but the state of affairs in New York is at a really bad point. Mayor Adams already declared a state of emergency and has been urging the nation at large to do the same. Since Biden's election into office and removal of Trump's policy, more than 7.5 million people has crossed that border into the United States, looking to fulfill their American dream. New York in particular have seen over 100,000 immigrants arrive on their doorstep in the last 12 months. The city has stretched every resource to its breaking point in order to accommodate the new members of their society. Services like housing, food, security, and healthcare are now presently a stumbling block for New York, as it's simply too much to do way too quickly. As the humanitarian crisis unfolds right before our very eyes, it creates new problems for the now and the future. With that many people arriving in the city, there's just no way the city law enforcement can keep up, which is why one of such issues is crime. New York tends to maintain its reputation as one of the safest cities in the United States. However, that might just be misleading. New York holds a larger amount of people in a smaller area, so even though 1 person out of 8 million isn't likely to be involved in a violent crime, the likelihood of said person to be in the proximity of a violent crime remains a very real possibility, and honestly, sounds much worse. Shortage of law enforcement personnel also leads to many crimes not even being reported. That's especially the case in areas like the Bronx, East Harlem, and along the subways, where either the poverty rate is high or the population is too much. In the subways, offense assaults are up 16.5%, and petty theft is up more than 25% from 2022. The crime rate in the subway also climbed up out of nowhere. In the first 6 months of 2023, it went down by 4.4%, but in June, it did a complete 180 and went up by 18%. In addition to that, since the turn of the year, over 3,000 knife-related incidents have been officially recorded in the city. The Bronx is also getting worse and is by far the most dangerous neighborhood in New York City. Statistics show about 9.28 violent crime occur per 1,000 people in the Bronx, comfortably higher than all the other boroughs. What's interesting is the fact that the Bronx remains the likeliest destination for immigrants to end up after cycling through the housing system, due to the fact that they won't stand out so much in that part of town. Overall, not every crime metric has gone up in New York in the last year, but there's still cause for worry, as a lot of the uptick in crime coincides with the skyrocketing immigration rate, and there's no hope for that to go down if more people keep trooping into the city. Which, if you come to think of it, where even are they going to live? Another discouraging realization of the migrant crisis is the fact that there's just no place for them to stay. Already, New York's emergency housing system holds more than 60,000 immigrants. The city have so far commissioned no less than 195 sites for accommodation to the homeless. A brand new shelter was opened on Randall's Island set to hold up to 3,000 asylum seekers. Although it was subsequently closed because of how inconvenient it is for the immigrants, Randall's Island is too far away from everything, and services are not easily accessible. They'd rather sleep on the streets somewhere in Manhattan. Due to the ever-increasing number of immigrants over such a short period of time, the city constantly keeps running out of room to house these people. New York City is obligated by law to take in and provide temporary housing for all immigrants, but they just can't at the moment. They even passed a new law demanding that all migrants in the city's housing infrastructure can only stay there for 60 days before needing to reapply or move out to make room for new immigrants. The lines to get into some of the city's shelter can become stagnant for 2-3 days, leaving families to sleep on the streets. And once their 60 days are over, it's not at all likely that they'll be in any shape to rent or own a home in the New York area. Housing is particularly one of the worst outcomes of the migrant crisis. The price of housing keeps going up and up. There simply is no available housing for all the new people, and even if they were, there's no way the newly arrived immigrants will be able to afford it. Maybe they would be, if they could get legal and meaningful jobs, but that also constitutes a problem area for the city. On average, the asylum process takes about 2 to 3 years to grant a work permit to an immigrant after arrival. Now, considering the fact that they're now being forced out of temporary shelter on a 60-day basis and the rising cost of inflation, there's simply no way immigrants can afford to survive in New York for that amount of time, just sleeping on the cold ground and waiting to be legal for work. Not to mention the fact that since there's a lot more immigrants than usual, the wait could now easily extend to further years and quite possibly never. So the logical next step is to find what works, which has now led to an underground illegal job market and people basically cheating the system in order to survive. A lot of the jobs that newly arrived immigrants take up are food delivery jobs from companies like Uber Eats, Grubhub, and Seamless. This window of opportunity is where the newly arrived workers come in, except that they aren't authorized to work. The food delivery apps require a formal sign-in with a valid ID, a bank account, and a social security number, all things they can't possibly have. And thus, they head to the underground digital identity market. Immigrants can often pay to borrow a friend's or stranger's credentials to sign up for the delivery app, usually for around $150 a month. So you would have people renting out their valid IDs to immigrants, and immigrants using the identity of someone else to be able to work, which is simultaneously illegal and their only choice. It doesn't stop there. Once they get the ID and sign-up covered, they then need a convenient way to be able to go around the city and actually deliver the food, something like a motorcycle or a moped. Hey there, enjoying the video so far? Leave a comment below if you know or have any experience with this issue in New York, and check out our other video, The Untold Story of New York's Collapse, for more on this topic. Anyway, the need has now created a marketplace for renting out almost brand new, unregistered moped bikes. In the NYC area, there are dedicated bike dealers who rent out the bikes for around $300 a week, and if all goes well, the migrants will be able to purchase it permanently within 2 months, as it usually costs around $100-200. The mopeds have to be unregistered because migrants can't get driver's licenses just yet, as they've only newly arrived, and thus they drive without one on public roads, which is illegal. So, if the vehicles are registered with number plates and driven by migrants with no driver's license, then the plate number would probably be picked up by red light and street cameras, which would lead to the confiscation of the bike and a likely arrest of the guilty migrant. So, what can the government do about all this? Well, the city of New York are basically sitting ducks at the moment. The decision to speed up the work permit issue, or authorize more housing, or to even shut down the border are all out of their control and can only come from the federal government. However, more security and officers can be stationed along the subway to meet the rising security demand. Same can be said of the Bronx. The city could channel more resources to reforming the borough and bringing the violent crime rate down to a reasonable level. Although it's important to remember that the city is seriously strapped for resources at the moment. The worst thing about the New York migrant crisis is the very real possibility that the worst is yet to come. Housing, security, and illegal jobs already look to be on the rise, and if nothing is done soon, the troubles could be multiplied tenfold.